In this video, we are going to learn how to crochet the willow hat. Now, I absolutely love the texture of this hat, especially these pearl look rows that we get by working some slip stitches. Now, don't be scared of slip stitches. If you just try to keep your tension nice and loose as you work, then you'll be flying along after a little bit of practice. So in this video, I am making the tween size hat, and this is designed to fit a head circumference of about 20 to 21 inches around. And the full pattern is written for 6 sizes from baby up to adult large, and I have linked that below if you do want to make a different size. And of course, if you do have a second to subscribe, that would be absolutely amazing. So before we get started crocheting, let's just take a quick look at what we will need to make this hat. So you will need any worsted weight yarn, so acrylic or acrylic wool blend would work great. I am using Wool of the End Days Tweed from We Crochet, and it is in the colourway Dawn Heather. Now the size that I am making requires just under 1 skein of this yarn, so just under 110 yards. But you will have to consult the pattern to see how much you need for the size that you are making. Then I am using a 5.5mm crochet hook, and you will also need a yarn needle for weaving in ends and a stitch marker or 2 just to mark the start and end of your rounds as you go along. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's get started on the ribbing. Now we want to leave a little bit of an extra long tail here because we're going to use the tail to seam the edges of the ribbing together. So let's start with a slip knot, and to begin we are going to chain 8. So we are going to work the ribbing using a stitch called the yarn over slip stitch. So this isn't too difficult, it just takes a little bit of practice. So we're going to skip the first chain from the hook, which is this one, and we're going to work into the second chain. So I'll yarn over, insert my hook into that second chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now what I'm going to do here is just continue to pull my hook through these top 2 loops, like so. And with much practice, I have discovered that if I turn my hook away from me like this as I'm pulling through, it's actually much easier. So if I keep the hook pulled towards me, it's harder to get it through there, but if I turn it away, it just goes through a lot more smoothly. So we'll just finish working one of these yarn over slip stitches in each chain across for a total of 7 stitches. And depending on the size of hat that you're making, you might have a slightly shorter ribbing. So just check the pattern to make sure that you're working the correct number of chains at the start. Okay, so that's the first row done. So we'll chain 1 and turn. And now the second row is going to be the exact same stitch worked through the back loop here of these slip stitches. So yarn over, pull up a loop and pull through the top 2 loops. Okay, so that's 2 rows done. So one very important thing to remember with this stitch pattern is to keep your tension as loose as possible. If you're pulling really, really tightly, you are going to find this stitch quite tricky. So keep your tension as loose as you can, and with a little bit of practice, after 5 or 6 rows, you'll be absolutely flying it. So let's just keep going. This is just a 1 row repeat for the ribbing. So we just work the same row for the length that we want our ribbing to be. So the size that I am making requires 66 rows of ribbing, so that's what I'm going to do. So I will continue on with that, and then I'll come back into the video to show you how to join them and get started on the body of the hat. So just before I finish up, actually, sometimes the last stitch of the row can be a little bit tricky to find, so just make sure that you're not skipping that stitch. So find that back loop and make sure you work into that one as well. And the best way to know if you are on the right track or not is to just count your stitches. So you should always have the same number of stitches in each row of ribbing. So I'm just going to fly along with this, and I will see you for the next section. Okay, so I have just finished all of my ribbing rows, and now before I go into the body, I'm just going to tie a very loose knot here just so this last stitch doesn't unravel. Then I'm going to fold my ribbing in half and seam the edges together using this long tail, and then we'll be ready to start the body of the hat. Okay, so that's our seaming done. So I'm just going to flip this around so that I am working on the right side now. And I'm just going to show you a little trick that I do sometimes just to reduce the number of ends that I have to weave in. So this is still the tail that I was using to seam the edges. And what I do is I just weave that in and out along the top of this row because I'm going to be working over this. So I'm sort of weaving my end in before working over it, and it's not going to go anywhere, and it just means when I get to the end of my project that I won't have any ends to weave in. Okay, so let's get back to the crochet, shall we? So I'll just untie that little knot. So now I am going to half double crochet all along the edge of the ribbing. So I will chain one, and that does not count as a stitch, and then I will start my half double crochet row. So I'm going to work one stitch for each row of ribbing, and you don't need to be too worried about where you place your stitches, but just do it as neatly as you can. This is definitely more of an art than a science, and once you get to the end of the round, just make sure that you have the correct number of stitches. Okay, so here I am at the end of the round, and I'm just going to join to the first half double crochet with a slip stitch. Now at this point you just want to do a quick stitch count to make sure that you have the correct number of stitches. So I want to have 66 stitches in this row because that's how many ribbing rows I had. So once you're happy with the stitch count, we can move on to round 2. So before I do that, I am just going to mark this joining slip stitch here just for a second, and I will show you why now. So we'll chain one and turn, and for this round we're going to work a round of slip stitches through the back loop, so working into the back loop here. So we're going to skip this joining slip stitch, and we're going to begin our round in this stitch here, and then when we come to the end of the round, our last stitch is going to be worked into this stitch here, so the stitch that we joined to, so the very first stitch of the previous round. So this will all make a lot more sense once we come to the end of the round. So let's get going now. So we're skipping this joining slip stitch that I've just marked very quickly, and we're going to slip stitch into the back loop. So I can remove that marker now, and I am going to just mark the first stitch of the round, because with the slip stitches especially, it's kind of tricky to figure out which one was the first stitch. So now we have it marked and we know. So the important thing to remember with this round is to just keep your tension as loose as possible. And you may even feel like your stitches are a little bit too loose, but honestly, for these slip stitches, there's kind of no such thing as too loose. So just keep your tension nice and loose and relaxed. Pull up your loops plenty high enough and just work all the way around. Okay, so I am at the end of the round and I have counted my slip stitches and I have one more left to work. And I'm actually going to work that into the same stitch that we joined with the slip stitch on the half double crochet round. So I'll just show you that stitch very quickly. So you can kind of see here, this is our slip stitch. This is the joining stitch going into the half double crochet. And this is the top of the half double crochet. So for the last slip stitch, I'm going to work that into the back loop here of that half double crochet. And that will give me my 66 stitches for that round. Okay, so there is my last slip stitch worked. Now I'm just going to remove my stitch marker and join to that first slip stitch with a slip stitch. So when we turn, we're going to skip this joining slip stitch here. We're not going to work into that, and we're going to start working directly into this one. Now, what I'm going to do is just mark that first one that we want to work into, because sometimes I have found once I turn, it can be a little bit tricky to see which stitch and which loops I need to work into. So for the next round, we're going to be working through both loops of that slip stitch. So let me just chain one and turn, and then you'll kind of see what I mean. So if you were looking at this without any stitch markers, it might be kind of tricky to see what loops do I need to work through. But because we have marked the stitch, it's now much easier to see. So let's just do our half double crochet through that stitch, and then we can take out the stitch marker. Now, if you wish, you can mark this half double crochet with a stitch marker. That's absolutely no problem. I'm not going to here just because I think I'll be pretty sure which was the first stitch. But if you want to, just do that. So if in doubt of stitch placement, use stitch markers. I do this all the time because sometimes, especially when you're turning rows, it can be really tricky to figure out where you need to work, and I just find stitch markers an absolute lifesaver. So let's continue on. So this round is just going to be half double crochet through both loops of the slip stitches. Now, you shouldn't find it too difficult to work this round. If you are finding it really hard to get your hook through those two loops, then it could be a sign that your slip stitches were too tight and you might want to go back and try that round again. Okay, so let's just zoom along quickly and work this half double crochet round. Okay, so I'm just at the end of this half double crochet round and I have one more stitch left to work. And again, this is going to go into the first stitch of the previous round. So let's just have a quick look here. So this is the slip stitch that we joined with at the end of the slip stitch round. And this was the first stitch of that previous round. So this is where our last half double crochet is going to go. So the same stitch as the one that we joined into. So let's just work that half double crochet and the round is done. So again, we just join with a slip stitch to finish off that round. So now all we need to do is repeat the slip stitch and half double crochet rounds. So depending on the size that you are making, the number of repeats will be different. So just consult the pattern and make sure that you repeat these rounds the correct number of times, and you will want to end on a slip stitch round. And after that, we will proceed into the decrease rounds just to shape the top of the hat. So we're going to work in even rounds, so no increases, just up to about here, and then we'll start shaping in the top of the hat so that we can pull it in at the top, and there won't be too much bulk or too much bunching up of the fabric in the way that there would if we just worked straight all the way up and then pulled it in at the top. So I'm just going to go ahead and start the next slip stitch round. So I'll chain one and turn, and remembering again to skip that joining stitch and then do our slip stitches through the back loop. And again, just marking that first slip stitch to make my life a little bit easier when I get to the end of the round. All right, so that's it. I'm just going to continue on with that, and I'll come back into the video when I have worked all my even rounds and I am ready to begin the decrease rounds. Okay, so I have finished working my even rounds. So for the size that I am making, I have worked a total of 12 rounds, and I have finished on a slip stitch round. So depending on the size that you're making, you might be working more or less rounds before you start the decrease section. So just check the pattern on that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to shape the top of the hat here, and we're going to do that by decreasing the number of stitches in each round. So let's get started on the decrease rounds. So I have already turned my work. I am looking at the right side of my hat, and I'm going to start as always with a chain one, and I am going to skip that joining slip stitch at the end of the previous round, and now I am going to work my first decrease stitch. So to do the decrease, we are going to work a half double crochet two together. So to do that, I yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then I'm going to yarn over again and insert it into the next stitch, and then yarn over and pull up another loop. So now I have 5 loops on my hook, and I'm just going to yarn over and pull through all 5 loops. Okay, and that is the decrease done, and that is also the first stitch of the round, so I'm just going to mark that before I keep going. So now I am going to work 4 regular half double crochets. Alright, so what we have effectively done here is taken what was 6 stitches and now turned it into 5 stitches. So that's our decrease pattern, and we're just going to repeat that same pattern all the way around. So I'm going to do another decrease with my half double crochet 2 together, followed by 4 half double crochets. And then another decrease, and so on all the way around. Now, if you are making one of the adult size hats, the first decrease round is going to be slightly different to this. So in between each decrease, you're going to have 5 stitches instead of 4. So just check the pattern just to make sure you have the correct number of stitches. So I'm going to continue on with this all the way around, and then I will move on to the second decrease round. Okay, so that is the first decrease round complete. So what I have done here is every 6 stitches I have decreased that to 5 stitches. So now for the size that I am making, my stitch count should be 55. So you can just check that you have decreased by the correct amount and that your stitch count is matching the one in the pattern. So let's move on to the next round. We're just going to join with a slip stitch as always, chain 1 and turn. And now this round is actually just going to be a regular slip stitch round. There's no decreases at all here. So let's just do that round quickly. and then we will be doing our next lot of decreases on the next half double crochet round. So I will just quickly do this slip stitch round, and then I will come back into the video to show you the next lot of decreases. Okay, so the slip stitch round is done, and now I am ready to move on to the next decrease round. So I have turned my work, I'm looking at the right side, I'm going to chain one, and as with the previous decrease round, we're going to do a half double crochet, 2 together in the first 2 stitches. So that's our decrease made, and now I'm going to work 3 half double crochets. So for each decrease round, what I'm going to do is work 1 less half double crochet in between each decrease. So for this round, we are taking 5 stitches, and we're essentially turning it into 4. And that's all there is to this round. Very easy. So I'll continue on with my decrease pattern all the way around. Okay, so here we are at the end of that second decrease round, and we can see how the top of the hat is just starting to slope upwards there. So the rest of the rounds are actually very simple. So we're going to work a slip stitch round next, and then the next decrease round on the half double crochets is going to be a half double crochet 2 together, and then 2 half double crochets in between that decrease and the next decrease. Then we're going to work another slip stitch round. Then the fourth decrease round is going to have a decrease, so the half double crochet 2 together, and then 1 half double crochet before working the next decrease. So I'm going to continue with those, and then I will come back into the video just to show you how to work the very last round and how we're going to pull the hat in at the top. So remember, we're going to do a slip stitch row, then followed by a decrease round with 2 half double crochets in between the decreases, our regular slip stitch round, then another decrease round with 1 half double crochet in between the decreases, and then finally 1 last slip stitch round. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then I will come back in to show you how to work the very last round. Okay, so we're nearly there. So I have worked my final slip stitch round, and my last decrease round is simply going to be half double crochet 2 togethers all the way around. So in the previous decrease round, I have my decrease, 1 half double crochet, decrease, 1 half double crochet. So all that's left to do now is work the final decrease round. So we'll just chain 1 and then do our half double crochet 2 together. So you will want to work this round a little bit tighter if you can, just so that there are no gaps. Okay, so we're just doing half double crochet 2 togethers all the way around. Okay, so there is my final decrease round done. So you can see we have tapered the hat in quite a bit. So at the top, there is just a very, very small hole that we need to close up. So there's not going to be too much bunching or too much extra fabric, which I think is a really good thing, especially for a beanie. So we're just going to fasten off and turn our hat inside out. So you want to leave quite a long tail just so that you can pull in all those stitches at the top and have enough to weave in. So grabbing our yarn needle, we are just going to weave this tail in and out along the top of the stitches of the final row. And then we will pull that nice and tight. And now all we need to do is weave in our tail. So I'm just going to go over and back a few times here at the very top of the hat just to make sure that it's nice and secure. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. And now I just want to weave in my tail. So now we just need to turn our hat the right way around and we are all done. So that is our finished willow beanie. So you can leave it like this, or you can add pom-pom at the top if you wish, whatever your preference is. And that's all there is to it. So thanks so much for watching. If you do have a second to subscribe, that would be great. And don't forget that I have lots more tutorials and free patterns on my website nedandmimi.com, so do check those out. Thank you so much for watching. Happy crocheting and take care.